From my last video, you probably figured out my torch build uses Centrina's torch, which works well with full faith investment. I want the sleep on this torch to give me an extra burst advantage when the opponent is slept, so that I can punish them hard with one incantation. After some initial testing with the torch and incantations, I've come to a few conclusions that I want to share with you to explain why the build turns out this way. By the way, other incantations were also tested, but they also fall into one of the following categories. Obviously, I want to make the most out of the sleep status effect to hit my opponents with a single incantation hit as hard as possible. Dragon Maw has an insanely high MV or damage percent, outstripping all competitions at a 628% physical multiplier. But while it outstrips its competitors at having high damage, it also outstrips them at having an amazingly long cast time. Your opponents will manage to roll this skill even if you start the incantation as soon as they're asleep. It simply is too slow. Giant's Flame Take Thee, uncharged, is actually fast enough to land, but the issue is the slow projectile speed, which I will touch upon real soon. The other two incantations on this list are quite close range. This is an issue because I also run the pulley crossbow on the build. Yes, I know. The crossbow is already quite a deadly weapon, even without another sleep weapon, as landing all 3 hits of the bolts can easily sleep most enemies. However, with Artrina's torch, it is even stronger than on other builds, because it covers for the torch's lack of range and you're not hard stuck into trying to land the bolts on a strafing enemy, or not having enough build-up on the torch. In short, the crossbow and Centrina's torch can sort of cover for each other. If you want a pure torch build, by all means, don't run the crossbow nor the incantations. The issue with this is, matches wouldn't be dependent on how good you are, as you have limited options with only a torch. It would depend on how bad your opponent is. Anyway, back to the build. What the presence of the crossbow means for the build is that you're not always at melee range when you sleep your enemies. Otherwise, O-Flame is a really consistent incantation, even if you don't react the second they're asleep. But since it is possible for my enemies to be further away from me, the incantation I have settled on is the Lightning Spear. This is already a good incantation with its fairly fast cast speed and projectile speed, unlike the slower traveling Giant's Flame Take Thee. It also does something else for the build. Because Centrina's has fire damage, you would be at a slight disadvantage when it's raining. However, your sleep punish move is lightning damage, which gets a bonus when it is raining, allowing you to reach a more consistent performance, even in the rain. While this build is playable at level 125, I have decided to bring it up to 150 after some testing. It doesn't really matter that much, but one reason is, when optimized, most builds have 60 vigor at level 125, so the 125 to 150 jump usually just increases the damage both players deal. And, in my case, I actually want that in order to quickly end the match after one single sleep. For a level 125 build, I would drop some faith and endurance while swapping the Phlox canvas to Great Jars, which overall just decreases your damage. But as I said, this build's goal is to KO them after they're slept. Since there is no way to make torches do more damage, I opted to make myself tankier, with enough poise to trade through some attacks because honestly, if my enemy just attacks, I am put at a disadvantage with only one torch to swing. The 111 poise mark also happens to allow me to poise through some extra higher poise damage attacks, including weapon arts like Storm Stomp and the first part of Flaming Strike, that both deal 100 poise damage. Yes, this build only has 79 faith and not 80. It is because all other stat points in vigor, endurance, or the strength and dexterity to meet the pulley crossbow's requirements are more important. Get over it, you don't need a perfect AC. So why are we running the Earth Tree Seal rather than the Gravel Stone Seal that does buff Lightning Spear's damage if we're only running just the Lightning Spear? Let me explain. First up, let's look at the incantation scaling at 79 faith. If we include the bonus from the Gravel Stone, it is equivalent to 365 faith scaling, which is 4.3% higher than the Earth Tree. However, defense calculation favors having a higher base incantation by a slight bit. Not enough for 4.3% damage most of the time though, so why Earth Trees? Well, The gravel stone actually weighs 1.5 more than the earth trees, which in our case requires 2 more endurance to keep our medium roll. If we drop 2 faith for the gravel stone, this is the new calculation, which is only 2.9% damage higher. So in actuality, the times where defense matters due to having a higher base incantation scaling will sort of even out the 2 seals damage, providing a nearly identical result. However, you are not limited to one single incantation, and can feel free to add other incantations to spice up your build. In which case, the earth trees will just be better if the other incantations you pick don't happen to get the dragon cult bonus. Enjoy some clips. Whew, I never died this many times testing out a build. This is certainly a build you can try if you want to challenge yourself, or surprise your enemy by busting out a 1k damage combo. Thankfully, they're playing dual daggers, which is really off meta and very short, so we can space and also try to catch him when he stops attacking. And sleep and combo. Okay, there's no way I'm gonna beat a UGS poker without using crossbow. You're just not gonna trade with your torch versus a UGS, even if you can wear 2 full sets of bull coats. So yeah, we can try a bit of torch, but not very effective. Still, we need to do some torch to make him think that we're still going to do some melee range attacks and then use the crossbow to kill him. Otherwise, it would certainly be too predictable. Okay, let's see. Oh, spacing. Oh, I thought that was dodged already, but I should have rolled. Okay, Moonveil. Oh, okay, almost 1 more hit. Oh no! Oh, shouldn't have jumped that. It's really okay. We'll try to catch the power sand spear. Oh my gosh, that went through with the combo. Dodge, yes. Okay, let's try to poke. Carefully. Okay, didn't catch. Oh no, no! Oh. I already heard the sound. That was the wrong play. Okay, maybe we can beat this dual playman. Somehow we got him that low, even though he's power stancing spears. Okay, 1 more poke. Let's go. Okay, careful here because he can still just run poke us. Okay, I think only 1 spear hit there. Nice. This is very hard to deal with, especially because he can just keep spacing us with the halberd and he's playing really carefully. Okay, well played. Yeah, if they play carefully, they sleep and combo, because once again it's gonna be really hard to trade power stance straight swords. And yeah, dual Trinas is gonna sleep us way faster than we're gonna sleep him. So we need the ranged option. Okay, he's gonna punch us. Okay, that was okay. Okay, let's poke. Nope. We can try to do a crossbow again to punish him. And combo. Yes, there we go. Did he just HP pot against a torch? You know what, I'm gonna just spam ranged at him. At this point, I don't care if he's gonna do that on a torch build, really. Okay, screw it. Yep. Okay, we're just gonna spam until we die, it's fine. Wish I have more incantations. This is when I wanna just kill this guy. Okay. Honestly, if he just strafes a bit, we're screwed, but yeah. That's 4 pots already, I think, so I'll count that as my win. Oh, too bad. Spacing once again. Oh, even pointing down. Well, that's a new low. Thank you for watching, guys. Like and subscribe, and if you want to support the channel, please buy my book. Krite, signing out.